Hello and welcome to webinar 4 of the Imagination Wednesday series that focuses on the different chapters of the Imagination Dilemma book. In this webinar, we're going to look at chapter 4, which also begins the second part of the book, which is dedicated to the imagination facets. So for those who are coming here for the first time, my name is Lydia. I am a social scientist, a national security professional, a systems thinker, and a technology strategist. My work experience involves many organizations, including defense organizations such as the DoD and Special Operations, as well as schools such as MIT and Oxford Business School. And here we are in terms of the webinar series. As I mentioned, we are on part 2. And we're starting with identity. The 4 timeless facets of imagination are identity, convergence, humanity, and dreams. And so over the next 4, we're going to unpack each. And in today's identity facet, we're going to look at how technology and culture are intertwined with our identity. And we're going to look at 2 case studies and some other ones that are not included in the book. And then I'm going to share some tools which can be very helpful to figure out what your identity is and what your organization's identity is. Now, the reason that I've found in my work that identity is so critical is because of the second principle of this book. So the first one was when technology can do everything for you, what's left is imagination, and that's a competitive advantage. That's the thesis of the book. The second principle is that properly defining what you are in the business of doing can open or close the imagination aperture. And I believe that this is quite critical. And that's why I put it as the first facet of imagination, because I think identity is just that important. And there's several aspects to it. So there's the customer identity or your user base identity. There's a founder identity, and there's an organizational identity. All of these play together. However, I'll be examining each one alone. And if you remember from webinar 1, we went over the Kodak example, which is the perfect example of the identity facet. So the innovator's dilemma had looked at the Kodak situation through the lens of their inability to innovate. And in that sense, their core business model was print photography, and they did it really well. And so if you were to look at Kodak through the lens of them being in the business of film and print photography, then you would see film innovation as very important, print manufacturing of film, very important, as well as photo ink for these pictures. And so in that sense, if you look at it through the innovator's dilemma from Clay Christensen, you would see that Kodak was not able to innovate outside of this model. However, if you were to look at it through the imagination dilemma instead of the innovator's dilemma, I believe that the imagination dilemma precedes the innovator's dilemma, you would see that the core business model of Kodak was actually memory preservation. That is how they should have seen themselves to be in the business of doing. And in essence, if they saw that their business, their core model, was really about preserving memories, they would have seen digital cameras as really part of what it is they do, as well as NFTs and even brain uploading. All of that preserves memory. And what I find really fascinating is that their marketing department really understood that they were in the business of memory preservation. And they came up with the Kodak moment. This is an ad from 1963. The reason I know that is because somebody wrote at the bottom in pencil 1963. And it says, moments like this won't wait for dad. And you see this mother hurrying to get the camera to take a picture of her child's birthday party. But in essence, if you were to look at this through what they were in the business of doing, they really weren't about film. It was really about capturing that moment, which is what the marketing team understood. And how you identify yourself and how you imagine yourself and what you're in the business of doing plays a really critical role in terms of how you're going to innovate and how you're going to take new bold steps in the market. America Ferrera did a famous TED Talk. It's called Your Identity is Your Superpower. And in that, she explained that her upbringing and her Hispanic origin is actually her superpower and not her weakness. And in fact, what she was alluding to was that everybody's unique heritage and their background and the way that they see themselves is their superpower. And this is also part of the imagination facet of identity. How we imagine what our identity is and where we belong in the world is very important. So if we go back to what is the customer identity, founder identity, and organizational identity, I want to bring back this slide that I keep showing. It's in the back of the book. It's in the last page because I think it's so important for those who are watching for the first time. This is how I kind of see everything all at once. And so I look at the different infrastructure stack of the digital economy, and then I look at the verticals that cross through it. So in the case of the identity facet of imagination, what we are interested in mostly is the social aspect, the society element of it. And this is where we'll find individual, organizational, cultural, community identities. So let's start with our first example. Our first example case study is a customer identity, and it's DressX. DressX is the first fashion store that exclusively sells digital fashion, which means that you can never order a fashion item that can be shipped to your home. It is all digital. And for those who are new to this concept, here we have a picture of two of the founders, and they are wearing digital clothes that has been digitally overlaid on a real picture of them. And you might wonder, what on earth can we do with this? Well, there are gaming platforms where you can use digital clothes to dress your avatar. You can use it for online dating. You can use it for work in Zoom calls. You can add earrings or a hat or a top. And you can use it for socializing, again, whether it's on like a Zoom platform or through a metaverse where you're an avatar. And you can use it also on social media. So instead of taking a picture of yourself with your physical clothes, you could take a picture of yourself and then overlay a digital clothing on top of you. And so what we have here is multiple new ways of expressing yourself through fashion, and it's digital fashion. One of the reasons they founded this company is because they were frustrated with the waste that the fashion industry creates, and they wanted to reduce it. And so here are the many ways. Here's an example of Zoom, DressX collaboration with Zoom, where you can overlay the different clothes, the digital clothes that you buy onto yourself as you are talking on Zoom. Then you have here some avatars where you can dress your avatar in digital fashion clothes. And if you think that this is something hard to do, it is not. It uses augmented reality on your phone. And so here's two pictures of me trying out the DressX platform. I am here trying on a hat, well, two different hats. And you can see that these almost look real. And in the hat on the right, you can see that I have like little leaves that are dangling from my hat in seemingly midair. They're suspended. And so what this also allows is for new ways to imagine clothing and what it looks like on us. And you can't have clothes that are fire or anything like that, but in digital clothing, you can. So this expands the aperture of what's possible with digital fashion because it doesn't rely on the laws of physics. So last year, I was giving my first metaverse talk. Ironically enough, it was on identity and humanity in relation to technological change. And I had to, for the first time, figure out what it is I was going to wear for my avatar. And I looked through all the clothing options, and I will say that, so this is what I chose. But the thing is that I had the same relationship with the digital clothes as I did with my physical clothes. I thought about, well, how does this look on me? And is this appropriate for the context that I'm speaking at? And it's really true that you want to represent yourself, and there's all these different ideas. And so in this case, I would have normally worn a suit, but the suits that they had were just not my style. And I thought that this was kind of fun given the venue it was semi-underwater and there were fish flying around as well, if you can see here on the picture. And so I thought this kind of gave it kind of an airy, ethereal kind of feel to this vibe that was already like that. But one of the things I was concerned about was, funnily enough, how my avatar's skin was exposed. This is not my skin, it's my avatar's, but still, I share this to share that these avatars are really a representation of us, and the desire to dress them intentionally is very much there. So I'm going to share a small video of what this kind of looked like. You'll see the back side. That's what I was really frustrated about. I'm like, why does the back side need to show so much of my avatar's back skin and the top of my avatar's butt? So these things are going to be increasingly an important part of our digital lives. And there is a lot of money to be made as well for those who think that this is a frivolous topic and market. It is not. So let's take a look at the digital fashion as expressed through DressX and the use cases and all of that. So this is how they have grown. They initially started just as an atelier that you send a picture of you and then they overlay kind of Photoshop, basically a digital fashion piece on top of you. But now it's getting a bit more sophisticated. So up to now, they've raised 17 million. They've been recognized by the UN and Google for their pioneering work. And if you're wondering, how big is the digital fashion market? Well, the other year it was at 500 million, but it is anticipated to grow to 5 billion in 2030. And this is a function of the increase of use in digital spaces and where we will be. And then also, so the avatar part is we can express ourselves in our avatar format digitally. And then in other spaces where we are coming as ourselves, like for me right now, we can overlay digital fashion on top of us as well. And so this is very much a growing market. But what really underlies it is them understanding that their customer wants to be able to express themselves and their identity, and that ultimately it is an important, powerful aspect of their identity that they want to express. So we shouldn't underestimate identity and how people imagine through the facet of identity. Another example of identity, now the previous one was customer, this one is a founder identity. This is Mythos Labs. They are a communications company, and they initially started focusing specifically on communication to combat violent extremism and disinformation. And their unique differentiator is humor. And I was intrigued by this company because of its founder identity and how much he leaned into it to create something truly unique in the market. So Mythos Labs founder is Priyank Mathur, and he grew up in the US and then moved to India when he was young. And he was living in Delhi and grew up around a lot of his relatives and went to an international school where he had all different cultures. He found himself to be the comedian of the house, and he just loved humor and he loved making people laugh. And he wanted to be a comedian when he grew up. However, he didn't think that he could make a living out of it, and his parents weren't too thrilled at the concept. And so the other interest of his is he wanted to be a spy. And so you want to be a comedian and a spy because why pick one when you could have both? But then he went to college and they didn't have that option. And so he pursued international relations and did comedy clubs on the side. But it was this interest of his, this combination, that made him unique. And he delved into this identity aspect of his. After college, he went to work for Homeland Security as a counterterrorism specialist. And he thought that there was a place here for humor. And he pitched, this is during the Obama administration at the time, he wanted to do a better messaging than what the State Department was doing at the time, which in his words was something along the lines of, don't do it, son. But he wanted to have something where there was humor because he really felt that if he could do that, he would be able to reach more people and be also able to counter some of the ISIS narratives at the time. And so he pitched his idea to the Obama White House. And there was one person who said, we want to give this a shot. So they gave him some money and he created this skit. It's called I Want to Quit ISIS. And you can find it on YouTube if you just search I Want to Quit ISIS. And it's a small video and it basically shows a ISIS recruit who's fed up of the office work and doesn't feel like he's enjoying himself. And so he goes to HR, ISIS HR, and says he wants to quit. And it's this conversation. And in that conversation, it's really well written, where it is not offensive. However, it exposes some of the misguided things that a lot of would-be recruits to ISIS had at the time. And it was quite successful. It received a lot of praise and recognition in CNN and multiple other media channels. And he explained that too many people look at comedy and say, oh, all it can do is teach you how to make others laugh. But for him, it was far more than that. It was teaching people how to feel something, showing them a different point of view. And that was what he learned in his career. And he combined the two things that he was very passionate for. Eventually, he was able to also take on some undercover assignments. But today, he has leveraged these two aspects of his identity, the comedic aspect and the aspect of national service in service of counterterrorism. Once that video came out, his business skyrocketed. And so many other organizations that had nothing to do with countering violent extremism reached out to him because they saw the value in using humor to communicate a message. And so now he doesn't just focus on violent extremism. He focuses on using humor to combat socially harmful narratives across the board. So sometimes they include gender-related and others. And so this is a story of a founder's identity where he was able to imagine through his market's problem, through his own identity and the way that he uniquely saw the world. And I think this is a very powerful facet. And when you look at this, also think about your individual identity, even if you're not a founder. We imagine through our own experiences and our unique ways of combining information together and our unique perspective on the world. Okay, so we did an example of customer identity, we did an example of founder identity, and now let's look at organization. I didn't have enough space in the book to include some of the organizational ones, and so here are some that are not in the book. And these are very, very new ones. These just came out. So with Chick-fil-A, this I think is very interesting. Chick-fil-A is a fast food family restaurant, and they serve chicken burgers and all things chicken. They recently announced that they were getting into the streaming business, the entertainment streaming business, like Netflix. And that took a lot of people by surprise because they're a fast food restaurant. Why are they going into entertainment? However, they see themselves as being in the business of serving families. And food is one thing that they have done to do that. But now they're looking more broadly. And so with what's called Play, this app, they plan to have family-friendly shows and games and podcasts and crafts. This is brand new, so it's yet to be seen how all of these things are going to unfold. However, what this represents is an organizational identity that has been able to ebb and flow and be reimagined. So initially, Chick-fil-A is in the business of food, fast food for family, chicken. That's it. However, if you take away that restrictive view of looking at them, which they have done, they're able to see themselves as actually really serving families. And with what they have done with Play, that announcement, to me, I interpret it as them being in the business of family joy, family fun, and family entertainment. In addition, of course, to food. And so Chick-fil-A is now reimagining their identity, expanding their business model, and serving their target customer in new ways. Another organizational identity example is Aura, which recently announced that they are going to collaborate. So first of all, Aura is a sleep ring, and they're all about sleep. They're sleep pros, they're sleep tracking pros. And they recently announced their partnership with Dexcom, which is a continuous glucose monitor that monitors the glucose levels in your blood at all times. And this is really fascinating because they had, over the years, been just focused on sleep, on everything sleep, measuring and tracking anything possible, doing all the studies possible on sleep. And so you could say, okay, they're in the business of sleep tracking and they do it truly very well. But they are flexing their identity imagination muscles and they're letting go of that sleep only oriented identity. And they're expanding, well, they already have slowly expanded into activity and fitness. And now they're looking into glucose monitoring and tracking that with all the other biometrics that they do have, such as sleep data, stress, heart activity, and health. Another example is Little, and I really like this one because if you thought that the Chick-fil-A one was unexpected, this one is truly unexpected. So for those who don't know, Little is a budget supermarket. It is from Germany, and it has grown to be all over the world. It's in France, it's all over Europe, and it's also in the US, and they're slowly growing to other places as well. Their model is basically bring any kind of supermarket goods, but at lower costs. They don't have any fancy decoration. They're just kind of straight to the point. And that's Little. However, they decided that they were going to not just do the supermarket thing, they were going to get into the business of data centers and cloud service offerings. And here's a Financial Times article, how Little accidentally took on the big guns of cloud computing. And this is true. So they are basically going to start having data centers and compete with Amazon's AWS, Google's cloud, Microsoft's Azure cloud, and all of that. And their story as to how they came to do that is very similar to how Amazon started AWS. So Little was already managing their own data centers, which were massive. And they thought, well, why don't we do this too? However, what's interesting is that this is also happening at a time where governments are concerned about their data sovereignty. And I'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's go over the identity part. So Little, for as long as they've existed, have been a budget supermarket. That is what they do. But they've decided to break free from that restrictive identity and expand into becoming a cloud provider. And this is how I think it's really important to see how other organizations have had the flexibility and agility to imagine themselves in a different lens. Okay, so now let's go back to the data sovereignty piece. So with Little, what's at play here is digital sovereignty, where countries are increasingly interested in having their data inside their territorial sovereignty in their country. And this is intertwining with corporate politics because different cloud service providers come from different countries, and they're worried that their data is going to be also spread out in those other countries. And if so, then subject to those other country rules. And so this intersects in the digital economy stack at the cloud and data level, which is what people are concerned about. And so Little is taking advantage of this moment, and they will certainly be creating waves. The moral of the story here is don't underestimate the power of reimagining identity. And with that, there's a quote I wanted to share from Eric Hoffer, and it's from The Ordeal of Change. And he says, every new adjustment is a crisis in self-esteem. And he was referring to individuals, but I think that this is applicable to organizations as well. Anytime an organization has to adjust to something new, for example, the internet when it came back out, and now AI as it's coming out, this is a crisis in their identity and who they are and what they're all about. And I think being able to navigate this will be critical. Which brings us to the tools. I think there are 3 very useful tools that can be leveraged to hone in on what you're really in the business of doing and understanding your identity. Starting with Jim Quick's. So Jim Quick is a brain expert. He's a brain coach. So basically performance on your brain, whether it's how exercise can help your brain function better, or nutrition or memory, he's all about it. And he has this exercise called I Am. And you're supposed to set the clock for 3 minutes and start writing down I am and then fill in the blank. And so within the first minute, here's some examples of what I've written. I am a woman, a lifelong learner, a systems thinker, a multilingual, a longevity enthusiast, a fashion designer, a daughter, a friend, a foodie, an author, an entrepreneur, a homeowner, a national security professional. These are just some that I've listed in the first minute. However, the idea is to keep going to 3 minutes because this helps show how multifaceted we are as individuals. And it gives us really insightful perspective on who we are, that multiple faceted person that we are. And so you can do this as an individual, but you can also do this as an organization and say, our organization is, and just list away all the many things. And the many interesting ones come at the 3rd minute. So I recommend trying it out. Another one I really like is from Christina Carlson's Your Dream Life Starts Here. And it's a wonderful book, which I will also reference when we talk about the dreams facet of identity, which is going to be the 4th and final facet of identity. So in her book is all about how to dream. And no, it is not woo-woo. It's a lot of homework and a lot of exercises. And one of them involves a values inventory. So here's a picture from her book where she shows a list of many different values, such as, so I'll just read the first line: achievement, adventure, art, authenticity, and balance. These are some, there's many more. It's not just that page. And her exercise asks to pick 5 to 6 of them and explain why they're important. Now, this values inventory is not only exclusive to her, there's many others who have done that. So another example of this is DeMartini's 13 questions to determine your values. And then another one is from The Kindness Coach. It's a book about how to be kind. And in that, there's also a values list to pick and choose from. So it doesn't matter where you find your list, or you don't even need to use any of these lists, and you can just think up your own. But doing an inventory on values is really helpful. So here's an example for me where I did that exercise from Carlson's book. So I picked 7. I know she said 5 or 6, but I picked 7. And these are the 7 that I picked: health, authenticity, intimacy, kindness, financial freedom, inner harmony, and optimism. And these are from her list. You can obviously choose things that are not in her list as well. And she said to list the values and then explain why they are important to you. And this is really important because it helps you hone in and ground yourself in the things that you care about. So for me, I wrote that health is on my list because I believe that health expands the opportunity of what is possible. Authenticity, because it is how everyone shows up as their best self. Intimacy, because deeper relationships are more meaningful to me personally. Kindness, because it automatically improves all circumstances, in my opinion. Financial freedom, because it bolsters self-determination. And you'll see that, others can even have the same values, but they'll have different reasons as to why they're important to them. Inner harmony, because it expands the capacity to explore outside the comfort zone. That's something that I value. So it's a different interpretation on inner harmony. And optimism, because the world is a better place when the glass is half full. So this is the values inventory is the second tool. And then the third tool I include in the book is the neurological levels, which was developed by Robert Dilts, who's a human behavior expert and a consultant on neurolinguistic programming. And so he thinks that identity is a function of and a byproduct of many other things below it. And so identity is built under values and beliefs, skills and capabilities, behavior, and environment. And this is how he sees this pyramid coming up to identity. And so the key W's here are placed as such. So your identity is who you are. Your values and beliefs is your why. Your skills and capabilities is your how. Your behavior is your what, and your environment is your where and when. So let's look at this now. Let's apply this. So we're going to apply it now at the individual level, and we're going to apply it at the organizational level. Again, the goal here is to better understand our identity so we can better imagine through the identity, whether it's the individual identity or the organizational identity. And let's start with the individual one. So if you want to further discover your who, again, we're now using that pyramid from before, the I am exercise can be very useful. If you're looking to understand your values and beliefs, your why, the values inventory that we just did, along whether it's the DeMartini's 13 questions or the kindness coach one, these are very helpful to understand your values and your beliefs. And then your how, a way to do that is to list all the degrees you have, all the skills, all your experience, all your know-how. A lot of our individual know-how doesn't necessarily come from formalized education. It comes from some of our life experiences, some of our passion pursuits, and the little things that we're obsessed about that we know so much about. And the capabilities also, I think, are important to the ones that you want to acquire to be the next version of you. Because the only thing constant in life is change, and we are constantly evolving. And so I think it's important to articulate more proactively where it is you're looking to evolve. And for behavior, your what, list the behaviors you currently practice. So for example, the habits, what actions you take, the way that you talk to yourself. It also can include whether you exercise or not, the hobbies you have, all the behaviors that you already have in your life, the things that you do. And then you list the behaviors that you would like to adapt. What this also does is it helps you project to imagine that next version of you. And so you understand who you are today and understanding where you want to be to help you imagine to get there. So here are the skills I have today. These are the skills I want to have in the future. This is the person I want to be in the future. And so it helps create that imagination space. And then for environment, this is about the where and the when. So listing all of the elements of your environment, your physical environment, your social relationships, your body. So for example, your home, your community, your city, your family, your friends, the digital spaces you inhabit. These are important as well. And it's helpful to list the ones that are not aligned with the aspects you want to change for that next version of you. In Dilts' triangle, you'll remember that the last one at the bottom, the environment one, is the largest, and he sees that as playing a very critical role. So understanding what elements of your environment are not aligned is important here as well. Okay, so now let's do the neurological levels applied to organizations. So for the identity part of an organization, it's about the second principle of the book. What are you in the business of doing? So articulating your core value proposition and your transformation to your consumers. So as we saw with Kodak, they were in the business of memory preservation, even if they didn't realize it. And with Chick-fil-A, we can see that they are creating a new version of themselves. They were in the business of feeding families and providing a safe family space for dining out. And now they are also looking to see themselves as in the business of serving families in fun and entertainment. So what are you in the business of doing? That exercise is important for the identity piece. For the values and beliefs, this is looking to the organization's value statement, if it exists, of course. But all of the value statements, the belief statements, the vision statements, all of these things that give indicators as to what the organization's values truly are. And in Carlson's book, she said that one way to know if your values and beliefs are aligned is to see where you put your money. So if one of your values, for example, is health, but you're not spending on your health, then your values and the way that you spend your money are not aligned. The same is applied for an organization, that if their value is one thing, but they're not spending money on it, then they're not aligned. For skills and capabilities, just as for the individual, it was about listing the degrees, experience, skills, capabilities you have. It's the same thing for the organization. What is the intellectual property, the human talent, the physical assets, the digital assets, the infrastructure that this organization has? And then list the capabilities that are needed and the skills for the next version of the organization. For behavior, with the organizational behaviors, it's what exists in practice right now. So what is the organizational culture? How is talent managed? And if you have any ESG, environmental, social governance practices, or if you are adhering to any of the UN SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is what UN SDG stands for. How are your customer relations? What are your public affairs like, etc.? And you can list those types of behaviors, and you can also identify where you're lacking, where you would like to be, but you're not just there yet. And then finally, we've got environment. So the environment includes an organization's brick and mortar environment, so their physical office spaces, stores, factories, etc. But it can also include and should include the digital spaces that the organization inhabits, such as the social media, apps, digital workspaces. All of these count as the environment. And then finally, also listing the elements that are not aligned with where the organization needs to be from an environment perspective. So these are the ways to apply the neurological levels to individuals and organizations. And then finally, I wanted to share the facets canvas that I developed. So many are familiar with the business model facet, which I have here. It's a very famous way to, in one page, explain what a business is all about. And I've created a supplement to the business model canvas or the lean canvas or whichever canvas you use. And so my supplement is the imagination facets canvas, where you can add that in conjunction to any other business canvas that you use and look at what are the timeless facets of imagination in relation to your organization. And so in this webinar, we've covered the identity aspect. What are you in the business of doing? And what are the identities at play? So I've explained the many ways that you can identify the identities at play, the customer identity, the founder identity. If there is a founder, sometimes there isn't a founder or the founder identity is no longer relevant, and the organizational identity. And so understanding what you're in the business of doing and the identities at play will be really helpful in imagining through the identity facet of imagination. And this is in the appendix of the book. So this concludes the webinar for chapter 4. And as you know, every chapter has its own song. Again, I've used a prompt that kind of summarizes this chapter. And I specifically said I wanted a big band jazzy tune because I like that kind of music. And that's what Suno AI created for me. And the song is They'll Find Their True Essence. I find it fascinating how the AI has created its lyrics. I hope you enjoy this. And you'll find it on the Imagination Dilemma YouTube channel, and you can just kind of scan the QR code here if you want to have it on your phone now. And then finally, if you want to reach out, feel free to use this QR code and get on my calendar. You can reach me on my website as well. And in our next webinar, we're going to look at chapter 5, which is the second facet of imagination, convergence. And it's all about technology convergence. I'm going to talk about what I call the technology butterfly effect. There's 3 kinds of effects, and I'm going to explain them. And it is to help you understand how technology converges so that you can anticipate it before it happens. And the 2 case studies I'm going to use are NVIDIA and Improbable. And we're going to go over 2 tools, systems thinking and second order thinking, which are critically important for when we are trying to understand how technologies are converging to create new value that never existed before. So thank you so much for coming by.